be the derivement of Roman Reigns winning the championship the night after TLC at the end of 2015, trying to get us talking about what could happen at WrestleMania between Triple H and Roman Reigns, which is obviously your WrestleMania 32 main event. Someone like Dean Ambrose is someone who you can create with outside of what's happening with Roman Reigns, because Roman Reigns is someone who is extremely difficult to create something with, and that's why we're seeing people like Stephanie and Vince involved in the storyline with Roman Reigns, because they don't have enough confidence at this point in time to give the championship to Roman Reigns because of how unpopular he is with wrestling fans. He's not selling as many t-shirts as The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin did. And I think right now in terms of merchandise sales, Dean Ambrose is unquestionably outselling Roman Reigns in the way of popularity. He seems to be everyone's favorite from the Shield. There's no question that he was my favorite of the three Shield members, with the exception of Seth Rollins, who had a lot of talent and who could have really went the distance in WWE. But now that he's out of the main event picture and Dean Ambrose seems to be in, because they had a lot of plans for Seth Rollins being in the main event picture for a really long time. They had to change everything, rewrite everything. I think this gives Dean Ambrose an incredible opportunity, and seeing him as Intercontinental Champion in these main events kind of puts me in mind of the WrestleMania 6 main event between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, where Dean Ambrose is obviously going into WrestleMania as the Intercontinental Champion and in the championship picture, chasing the championship along with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, trying to get that title off the Authority at whatever expense they have to go through to do that, whatever hell they had to be put through. That's kind of what it resembles, how Hulk Hogan was the champion and the Ultimate Warrior was the Intercontinental Champion, and we could be seeing a champion versus champion scenario with Triple H versus Dean Ambrose, and Dean Ambrose being the Intercontinental Champion and Triple H being the world champion for the 14th time. That would be awesome, seeing WWE champion facing Intercontinental Champion for the first time in a WrestleMania main event since WrestleMania 6 back in 1990. That was the last time we saw some of that being played out. And just for the response that Dean Ambrose got in the Royal Rumble match, I mean, that was absolutely incredible before what happened, that happened. And I think that Dean Ambrose really needs to be put over for these responses that he's getting. And not to say anything about what he's doing for the Intercontinental Championship, because the Intercontinental Championship is really looking phenomenal right now on Dean Ambrose, but I think he's worth something more right now in WWE with how many wrestling fans are talking about him. I think there are certain wrestlers who are meant to be Intercontinental Champion, and there are people like Dean Ambrose who are obviously meant for something far greater in the WWE, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Why, if they gave Dean Ambrose a shorter reign for the Intercontinental Championship than what we think he's going to have. Right now, it looks like Dean Ambrose could have up to a 4-month reign, between 4 and 5 months, as Intercontinental Champion. If I had to put a timeline on Dean Ambrose being Intercontinental Champion, I would say by April or May of 2016, and Dean Ambrose will be a number one contender for the championship, regardless of who the champion is. Right now, it seems like 4 or 5 months is what we're looking at for Dean Ambrose, and then we're going to see something far greater attained by Dean Ambrose, probably a King of the Ring title or something in the way of a championship that he will garner that's ultimately greater than the championship, whether he defeats Triple H or Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns down the road. It remains to be seen, but I think that ultimately what he deserves is something far greater. And just with how much I've been a fan of Dean Ambrose and just putting him over all the time, I thought months ago by now we'd be talking about Dean Ambrose as your reigning WWE World Heavyweight Champion because of just how popular he was. And I thought that months ago, what's happening now for Dean Ambrose should have been happening back then. Back when Seth Rollins was champion and Dean Ambrose was the number one contender, we were seeing phenomenal ladder matches between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose was trying to redeem what happened to the Shield months before when Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose were best friends, and then Seth Rollins double-crossed Dean Ambrose, and then Dean Ambrose was chasing Seth Rollins while Rollins was Mr. Money in the Bank ever before he cashed in the way he did last year at WrestleMania to become champion. And then Dean Ambrose went after Seth Rollins, saying that he wanted redemption, and he came so close to getting it. I think one of the best matches that really illustrates and puts into perspective for wrestling fans just how good of a wrestler Dean Ambrose is and always was that ladder match with Seth Rollins. That exchange was phenomenal. Even before the ladder match, when Dean Ambrose stole the title and said he was the deserving champion and the undisputed champion setting up for the ladder match was awesome too. The entire program between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose was great wrestling psychology, and I can't stress enough how important great wrestling psychology is in feuds like the likes of Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins, and how it goes a long way in really illustrating what this business is about. If you're not in the business to be a great wrestling psychologist or to be a champion like the WWE or Intercontinental champion, you pretty much have your purpose being defeated before you ever even have a purpose in wrestling. So you're there to be the best, and I think that Dean Ambrose is someone who ultimately deserves something better than what he has right now going on for him. Yes, the Intercontinental title is a start for Dean Ambrose, not to say he'll see something greater happen for him down the road, because it's, again, drawing conclusions way too soon for Dean Ambrose in his future. But I think that something will happen for him, whether it be a main event against Triple H, Brock Lesnar, or Roman Reigns. I really would like to see Roman Reigns versus Dean Ambrose in a one-on-one scenario for that championship, which is why it kind of upsets me that Roman Reigns lost the championship as soon as what he did. It was to be expected. He would have lost it as the first time, as early as the first time he defended that championship. But if he would have kept the title and survived the Royal Rumble, I think an interesting main event would have been leaving Brock Lesnar out of the equation and had him feud with the Wyatts for Fastlane, and then had the main event be Roman Reigns versus Dean Ambrose, WWE Champion versus Intercontinental Champion for probably the WWE Championship, if not that, both championships, title versus title. Would have been awesome to see at Fastlane. I just want to see that exchange between Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns in a way that we've never seen it before. We've seen so many matches between Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins back as far as Night of Champions, when Reigns had that injury which kept him out of the ring for a couple of months, which catapulted him to eventually coming back to win the Royal Rumble in 2015. I think that injury was in 2014 in that match between Seth and Reigns. But here's the thing. I think that we've seen way too many matches between the same Shield members, and not enough matches between the Shield members that we want to see, either one-on-one or tag team matches. And I think a match between Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, kind of like how Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan really set the pace for WrestleMania 31 last year and got us all excited to see possibly Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, or the Cinderella story in the way of Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar in your main event of WrestleMania 31. Either way would have been awesome, and I think either way this year would be awesome when you're talking about someone like Dean Ambrose, who is making the Intercontinental Championship look so phenomenal and giving wrestling fans something actually worth talking about, which is something you can't appreciate enough as a wrestling fan, because as wrestling fans, we become very irritated by seeing the same thing played out all the time, the same irritating angles, the same irritating concepts often reiterated, and we want to get to a point of a reprieve. And I think this is the pinnacle that we strive to get to as wrestling fans. We stress the issues and drive home the issues of how we've seen the same stupid, pathetic storylines all the time, blaming Stephanie and Triple H, either that or John Laurinaitis or Vince McMahon for what's happening in professional wrestling, because they're forcing us to buy into the idea of people like Dean Ambrose being Intercontinental Champion when we want to see something more for someone like Dean Ambrose. The Ambrose Asylum obviously is running rampant throughout WWE and getting people talking and selling a lot of t-shirts and merchandise for WWE. But if WWE weren't so stupid, they'd realize that the most popular wrestler out of the Shield right now is Dean Ambrose. When you have the conversation with the everyday wrestling fan every day all the time, their favorite wrestler of the Shield is Dean Ambrose, and more people are saying that more frequently now. So obviously it's raising the issue of how Dean Ambrose's overwhelming popularity is an issue that's being overshadowed by the popularity of someone like Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns, who they are just forcing us and telling us to love. If anyone's forcing us to love someone like Roman Reigns right now, it's really Vince McMahon, whose purpose is really just to push Roman Reigns and to create Roman Reigns into something far greater than what he actually is, because Reigns can't do it on his own. Reigns just can't get the job done for me. That's why I was never a Roman Reigns fan. You know, if he was more entertaining in the way of a Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out drinking beer, giving people the middle finger, like we saw in The Attitude Era. I know it's unacceptable now with the PG rating, but I mean, he's trying to really become the new Stone Cold Steve Austin by putting his hands on the McMahon family. And for some reason, that philosophy of putting your hands on Vince McMahon at WWE Creative is the way to create a rebel in WWE, but it only worked once. One time, in my opinion, and that was with Stone Cold Steve Austin. After they tried that psychology with Stone Cold Steve Austin stunning Vince McMahon and having issues with all the McMahon family, it never worked after. They tried it with Randy Orton, they've tried it with people like Brock Lesnar, and now they're trying it with Roman Reigns. It failed all different accounts. We saw it from whatever way you looked at it or chose to look at it or perceive. What's been happening with Vince ever since 2009, 2013, and now 2016, 3 years later after he was F5'd. By Brock Lesnar. Now he's being super punched by Roman Reigns. It's not working, in my opinion, because it only worked once with Stone Cold Steve Austin back in the lateral part of the 90s, just before we turned over to the new millennium. So it's not working now, and I think what really is working is something that's being overshadowed, and that's Dean Ambrose, because of just how fun Dean Ambrose is. Not to mention just how funny he is, just how funny Dean Ambrose's promos tend to be, saying we're going to hit everything that moves to people like John Cena. And putting him in the ring with John Cena as his tag team partner is just so incredible, because Dean Ambrose has this chemistry that he has that's never noticed enough or given enough credit for having with people like, say, John Cena or Randy Orton or even Brock Lesnar and Triple H. He just is able to take a storyline and make it so entertaining. But that's why I'd like to see Dean Ambrose, say, in a program with The Rock or Triple H eventually, because I think ultimately not only could he bring the best of himself out, but he could also bring the best out of anyone he works with. That's what we're seeing in the Intercontinental title division right now. It matches between Dean Ambrose and Kevin Owens. The best of whoever Dean Ambrose is facing is being brought out along with the best of Dean Ambrose, because Dean Ambrose wants to see something happen for him down the road that is ultimately greater than what we're seeing happen for him right now. And I'm not talking something in the way of, say, more Intercontinental title reigns, like a second or third title reign. He wants to see at least one title reign as champion in WWE, and that's what I want for Dean Ambrose, because I'm a Dean Ambrose fan. Not just because I'm a Dean Ambrose fan, but for every Dean Ambrose fan out there, whoever knew who Dean Ambrose was or what he was about, or whoever said they were a Dean Ambrose fan. If you ever said to anyone that you were a Dean Ambrose fan, or just said to yourself, one day, I'm a Dean Ambrose fan, you have something to be proud of, because you're someone who supports someone who is always overshadowed and undermined with the Shield. It's always been that way. People always jump to conclusions and say Seth Rollins or Roman Reigns is my favorite to come from the Shield. You don't realize how stupid that statement sounds until you actually take a step back and put into perspective how stupid that actually sounds, because you're just sounding like everybody else when you say you're a fan of Roman Reigns. But if you say you're a fan of Dean Ambrose outside of Roman Reigns, at least you're separating yourself and putting yourself in an entirely different category and an entirely different pedestal than what every other million of wrestling fans are doing. Everybody is the same, saying they're a Roman Reigns fan, and people are just trying desperately to love Roman Reigns. Why would you love someone like Roman Reigns over someone like The Rock, who just recently returned and is in a program with The New Day? I mean, the program with The New Day and The Rock is phenomenal, because you can put three more entertaining wrestlers right now in a program with The Rock that's more fun to watch right now than The Rock versus The New Day, with the Usos thrown in there to promote the tag team division. That's going to be so fun to watch. And right now, I think that's what programs are all about in professional wrestling, just how fun and entertaining they are. And you can't honestly say that something like Roman Reigns versus Triple H is so much more fun and entertaining than what we're seeing with The Rock and The New Day right now, because it's not. It's something that really irritates me. They're just trying to convince us to like someone like Roman Reigns. Obviously, he's not going to blow up in the way of a Daniel Bryan. That's to be expected. I mean, Daniel Bryan's popularity was really overwhelming and really hard to put into words for a lot of people as radio shows and columnists. It will always be very difficult to really compare the popularity of Daniel Bryan to the popularity of a Roman Reigns, because he's just not going to get to that level. Nobody could